As the number of disciples continued to grow, the Hellenists complained against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. So the 12 called together the community of the disciples and said, "It is not right for us to neglect the word of God to serve at table." This past week, I have been doing some work with the seminarians, with the Office of Seminarians, to prepare for the ordinations that are coming up. This might surprise you, but we never had a class in seminary on procedures for ordinations in time of pandemic. And so we are having to figure all of this out as we go. And so I've been working with different people in the chancery to do just that. And so I've been thinking about how this will be the first time that I am director of seminarians during the ordinations, and because of that, I will have a role to play in the ceremony. And so the role that I have to play is that I address the bishop on behalf of the candidates and ask the bishop to ordain them. It's a very formal process. And so the words that I will say, I will address the bishop. "Most Reverend Father, Holy Mother Church asks you to ordain these, our brothers, to the responsibility of the priesthood." And the bishop responds, "Do you know them to be worthy?" And then I say, "After inquiry among the Christian people, and upon the recommendation of those responsible, I testify that they have been found worthy." So I was thinking about this in light of the first reading, in light of the rite of ordination. And in this we see that the work of holiness, the work of vocations, is not just the work of the bishop. It's not just the work of priests. It's not just the work of the director of seminarians or the director of vocations, but it is the work of the entire Christian people. The work of forming people in holiness and the work of forming people for vocations is the work of the community. And so I want to talk today using this microphone, not the one I have on me, about 3 ways that you, the community, are to be involved with shaping people in holiness and in shaping people for ministry in the diaconate and the priesthood. And the first one is, I think, the most important, but today probably the most lacking. And this is what we call remote preparation for the priesthood. And this is true of marriage and holy orders, that these are lifelong sacraments of service, and so they require a lot of formation. And we have a period of formation that is done leading up to the reception of that sacrament. This is called the proximate formation for that sacrament. It's close in proximity to the time when a person enters into that sacrament. So it's called proximate formation. But I think we need to focus more on remote formation. And this takes place throughout the entire life of a person leading up to that sacrament. And this can be done in a lot of different ways. It's done in the home, when parents teach their kids how to pray, when parents bring their children to Mass, when parents bring their children to confession, when parents give an example of how we react when we mess up by going to confession themselves. Right? This remote preparation is done whenever priests and deacons preach about marriage. Whenever priests and deacons preach about holy orders, about what it means to be a deacon or to be a priest. Right? This is all ways that people are formed that remote formation for the sacrament that they will one day be called to. And I said that this is probably the most important, but also probably the most lacking type of formation that we have. Right? We've made great strides over the last many years in formation in the seminary. There are all kinds of checks and balances. There are all kinds of conferences. There are all kinds of classes and evaluations that seminarians go through in order to become priests. That's not to say that it's perfect. It's not to say that there's never any mistakes made. But formation in the seminary today is probably some of, if not the best formation that we have had in the church. It's very good. But that remote formation is missing. And this is seen in the formation in the seminary. Just last year, I believe, they came out with a new document from Rome that governs the formation of seminarians in the seminary, the formation of priests in the seminary. And one thing that was really pushed for was to have men go for a year into their own diocese and be formed so that they could be ready to enter the seminary. And this is a response to a lack of remote preparation. Right? We see guys coming in with underdeveloped human formation. Right? The ability to communicate with people. The ability, as the documents say, to be a bridge rather than a hindrance between the people and God. Right? We're lucky that our guys here don't have that issue, but a lot of guys that are coming in are very immature on a human level. They're also very immature, a lot of them, in spiritual formation. And so that year that the Vatican envisions that guys would go through before they enter seminary would focus on human formation and spiritual formation. Basic teaching of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Because again, we as priests and families for the last 60, 70 years or so have done a pretty bad job in forming young people in the basic truths of the faith. And so we're seeing that we have to do some remedial work with them before they can really enter into the serious work of priestly formation. We also see that a lot more men are coming to formation from broken families. And that has an effect on them. Right? Part of that remote preparation for the priesthood or marriage is one's experience of that vocation. You all know that I'm a pretty happy guy. If I was just a mean, grumpy, unhappy priest, I probably would not inspire many young men to think about becoming priests. Right? Nobody wants to become miserable. The same is true in the area of marriage. The more good, holy families and marriages that we have, that young people come from, that young people see, the more healthy, holy marriages we're going to have. Right? They're going to see that example and they're going to want to imitate it. And so we can sum all of this remote preparation up by saying that even though we do have to some degree a crisis of priests, a shortage of priests, I think it stems from a crisis of holiness. Right? A shortage of good, holy, solid family life that these young men can come from and then be good clay, if you will, to be formed into good, holy priests. And so we need to work both in families and priests. We need to work on that remote preparation for the priesthood. Another way that you, the community, are to be involved in preparation and formation for the priesthood is in selecting candidates. Right? You, the faithful, have great insight into holiness. You have a great insight into this process of selecting young men to study for the priesthood. You can see oh, that young man is very reverent. Right? The way he serves at the altar, you can see that he's focused. You can see that it's something that he desires to do. And so if you see a young man doing that, then you should approach him and ask him if he's ever considered becoming a priest. Right? You don't have to beat him over the head. You don't have to corner him and say, I'm not going to let you leave until you decide to go to the seminary. But just bring it up. Have you ever thought of being a priest? You'd make a good one, and then leave it at that. If he's already thought about it, that's going to resonate, and it's going to stick with him, and he's not going to be able to stop thinking about it. Right? I know this because people at my parish did that, and it was really annoying because I started to think about it, and I couldn't stop. It made me ponder that call to the priesthood, and so you have a role in helping to select candidates for the priesthood. There's a report that comes out every year on the men that are being ordained in the United States. And this year, 9 out of 10 of the young men who are going to be ordained said that someone encouraged them to think about and to become a priest. Right? 90%. And so you have a very important role in encouraging young men to think about a call to the priesthood. Right? What do we say in that rite of ordination whenever we are calling the candidates to come forward? After inquiry among the Christian people, we say that these men are ready to be ordained. And the third way that you can help in this process of formation of seminarians, in this calling forth of young men to that life of service in the priesthood, is through their actual formation. Right? By staying in touch with the people, the guys studying for the priesthood, especially those from our parish. We're very fortunate to have Joshua and Pierre studying for our parish. And so keep in touch with them. Right? I'll give you their address. I won't give you their phone number, but I'll give you their address. And you can write a letter of encouragement to them, letting them know that you're praying for them. Right? It's incredibly helpful because they're removed from the parish, they're removed from the diocese during their time of formation. And so it's helpful to be reminded by a simple letter that there are people back home praying for them, and that there are real people back home waiting for them to come and to serve them by giving them the sacraments. And so pray for them, reach out to them. Right? The devil is very active in discouraging young men who have experienced the call to the priesthood. And so we, on our part, need to be active in encouraging them and praying for them that they would see that process through if that is what God is calling them to do. So the 12 called the community together, and the disciples chose men to go and to serve. In the homily for the ordination of priests, it begins like this. This is one that the church gives to bishops as an option to use. Beloved brothers and sisters, because these our sons, who are your relatives and friends, are now to be advanced to the order of priests, consider carefully the nature of the rank in the church to which they are about to be raised. I think this beginning of this homily is a great reminder that priests are not just born priests. Right? I figured that out when I was a junior in high school. That real people experience a call and they become priests. They're not born that way. Right? Priests don't come from a laboratory. They're not created off-site. They're not created in some vacuum. But they come from homes. Right? They are your sons. They are your friends and your relatives. And so we need to do a better job in our community of forming people in holiness and informing them in an environment where they can really discern a call to the priesthood or to the religious life. And so we pray that this, our community, may continue to have that strong tradition that we have of providing young men to serve at the altar as priests of God.